Good evening to you, and it's good morning to me. My name is Howard Lieberman. I live in a small town called Stillwater in the state of Minnesota in the USA, where the winters here are bitterly cold, and the summers are hot, humid, and full of mosquitoes. And people ask why we live here because it's a wonderful place and we love it. I am a retired attorney as well as a storyteller, performance artist, and political commentator on TV here, where I opine and so far I try to offend as few people as possible, but I'm generally not successful at that. And I'm normally a creature of the evening and the night, so for me to be telling in the morning is always a pleasant surprise. And but I will do my best. I've actually had a little coffee here. And the other thing I want to say is that um, my wife and I just came back from 2 weeks in southern Texas with our kids and our grandkids. And I came home with acute bronchitis and some kind of other infection in another part of my body. And this is the first time I've been out of bed in about 4 days. So um, here we go. I am a professional storyteller. My storytelling generally lives in the personal narrative storytelling world. I use stories about my own life, which was a very unpleasant life early on, and I try to use my life as a window through which people can look and gain empathy for people around them who may not look like them, who may not have the same fortunate circumstances as them. And I think people are surprised to find out that I was what was once known as an at-risk youth. I'm Jewish, and I tell stories in the Jewish tradition, some folktale, some not. And um, as I get older, as I'm 75, some of the edge that used to be in my stories is diminishing as my age increases. So that gives you a sense of who I am. And last thing I'd like to say is um, the storytelling world, at least domestically, lost a woman named Angela Lloyd in the last day and a half. And she was a beautiful, electrifying piece, just a joyful person, a type of teller. You'd say, my gosh, I'm so glad I got to spend time listening to her or talking with her. And we were on a program together about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And so this is dedicated to her, although our stories are very different. Where she brings joy, I sometimes bring grief. But she was a great woman. And so here's to you, Angela. I'm sitting in a restaurant in Boston. It was maybe 10, 15, perhaps 20 years ago. And I had just closed an important deal for an important client. And I looked the part. I had on a very expensive custom tailored sport coat, a blue cotton chambray shirt. I don't know what chambray is, but it's supposed to be a very nice fabric. Designer jeans and crocodile boots, my lucky boots. The boots I wear when I want to feel confident. And I'm dining by myself, which is something I often did when I was working professionally because I traveled around the country and throughout North America on behalf of my clients. And so I was usually alone for dinner. And I'm sitting at this, what I would call today a very ridiculously overpriced restaurant, feeling smug about myself. And I see two tables over a very elegantly dressed, elderly black man with short white hair, and obviously expensive clothing. And I look at the man and I catch his eye. And he looks at me with a, I think I might know you expression. And suddenly it's 1968, the summer of 1968. I'm on the road. I'm going wherever the road takes me because when you're homeless, and I was homeless, the road took me to Boston. I'm sitting on the street. I wasn't panhandling per se. I didn't have money, but I was tired, so I sat. I wasn't asking you for your money, but some people noticed that I had a baseball cap on the ground next to me. Not because I wanted your money, but because it was warm. So I put the hat down, and I did notice, however, put money into my hat, mostly coins, silver, copper. And I was hungry. I had no place to stay. The sun was getting lower in the sky. And I was kind of sad. But that was not unusual for me because I was mostly sad those days. I was also angry. I was also closed-minded. I basically didn't like anybody. A young, muscled black man in a white t-shirt, skin tight, wearing jeans, walks over to where I'm sitting and puts a piece of paper in my hat. It's a dollar bill. The first dollar bill anyone had put into my hat. And I looked up. I caught the man's eye. He turned around and he walked away about a half a block. At which point he turned around again and he walked back towards me. Now, when you're homeless and you're living from place to place, you learn to be suspicious of everybody because you don't know what their intentions may be. But as this elegant man, this muscled man, walked toward me, he took a $20 bill out of his pocket and put it in my hat, and he looked down at me and asked me if I had a place to stay. At that moment, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what do? I don't have a place to stay tonight. But I can't just say yes, because this man could be crazy. He could be violent. He might kill me. But I learned, and I had learned by then, to trust my instincts. And I looked up at this man, and I said, I don't. He said, come, you can stay at my place. Again, a moment of panic, a moment of fear, as his hand reaches down and says, come on. I stand up, we walk somewhere in Boston, I no longer remember where it was, and we stop in front of this old house that in New England in the US, some of the houses have been there since the early pioneers of this country. And he said, this is where I live. If you'd like, come on up. And at this point, the sun had settled. It was getting dark. So I took a chance. And I went up. And this was a beautiful, beautiful row house, as they're called, a brick row house built in the 1700s, which for my country is very old. And he shows me around. He said, this is my bedroom. It looks out on a veranda, and there's a garden below. And he said, over here is a small room. It's not as gracious and elegant as mine, but you're welcome to spend the night here. And he walked away. And now I didn't know what to do, but I did what I usually did. What I usually did do is when he walked away, I looked in some of the drawers to see if there was something I could steal. Remember, I wasn't a good child. I was an at-risk youth, and when you could find small things to steal, ideally money, you didn't pass up those opportunities. And I know that many men keep their money in their underwear drawer. I don't know why. Maybe because they think that most people won't go into their private drawer where they keep their under things. I did. I found a wad of bills, which I immediately slipped into my right blue jeans pocket. And then I opened the closet, which was there, and the closet had nothing but a row of red velvet gowns. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, what did you do, Howard? What's going on here? And I hear footsteps behind me come into the room. And this man asked me if I like his dresses. What do you mean, your dresses? I was a sheltered orphan. I didn't know about men who dressed up like women to perform, drag queens. He said, I wear those dresses. That's my performance outfit. I'm a drag queen. At that point, I'm trembling. I didn't know what a drag queen was. I didn't know what a gay person was. I didn't know I just knew the boys and girls I met on the street who were basically like me. Not necessarily good kids, but kids that I considered normal. I said, what does that mean? He said, I dress up. I come out and perform to music and people give me money. I have a stage name that's La Diable. And I'm very good at what I do. He explained to me how he dressed as a woman, and he showed me a drawer below the underwear drawer where I stole his money, where he had devices, we'll call them, garments that allowed him to create the illusion of having breasts, of being a woman. I think he sensed that I was not comfortable learning about men who dress as women to perform songs and God knows what else they do. He walked away. He said, this is your room. Sleep well. And there was a small bed. It was a bed, not a floor. It was a bed. It had a pillow. I had a backpack. I put it down. And I went to bed. And he did not rape me in the night. In fact, nothing bad happened to me that night. I slept very well until I smelled coffee and bacon and eggs. I stumbled out of my room into a kitchen bigger than any place I had ever lived. And La Diablo was making breakfast and invited me to sit down and join them. Okay, I did. And we ate and we talked. He asked me about who I was and why I was on the street. I told him that our dad had left us when I was young and my mom died when I was young. And I was in what we call the system until the system kicked me out on the street because I was angry. And we got along pretty well, actually. He was a nice, normal human being who made his living doing whatever people who dress in red velvet gowns do when they go out. And he said, look, you can stay here as long as you like. And I'll give you keys to the house. And you can consider this your place for as long as you need. No one had ever done that for me before. I was used to being kicked out of places, not invited in. And I developed a life. I would go out. I would hang out with the street kids during the day. I would take drugs. Sometimes I would drink out of a brown paper bag. And that was my life. I had a life. I would come and go. I would come into the house. La Diablo would be at work at night, but left me a card with a phone number. And she wrote to me, if you ever need anything, here's my number. Where I work, you can call me. I had a good life. This was a real place. One night, I was sitting in the house. I developed a migraine headache. I have always had migraine headaches. As a young boy, I remember my mother putting a cold compress on my forehead, which didn't cure the headache, not at all. But when your mother puts a cold compress on your forehead, that cures a lot of ills. I said, okay, Howard, you have a migraine headache. You don't have a mother anymore. I put a compress on my own forehead. But without the love of my mother, it was, not to be corny, cold comfort. And the headache got worse, and it got worse. It was the worst migraine I'd ever had. And if you've never suffered migraines, you don't know. But a bad migraine feels like this could be the time when you die. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I a voice answers the phone and goes, yeah? Well, what? I said, is La Diabla there? Who's this? Who's calling? This is a business. I said, I'm her son. I'm her boy. Hold on. Slams the phone down. Finally, La Diabla picks up the phone. Hello? La Diabla. It's me. Boy? What's the matter? I said, I think I'm dying. I think I'm dying. She said, you're not dying, boy. Not while I'm around. She said, hang on. She hangs up. She comes about 10 minutes later, storming in the front door in a red velvet gown, which she wore quite well. It was very flattering. And she picked me up in her arms. Now, I've never been a large person, but back then I was pretty small. She carried me downstairs. I could feel the muscles. With one hand holding me, she hailed a taxi. A drag queen in a red velvet gown holding this strange, scrawny-looking boy with long hair and a little scruffy beard. Got in a taxi and took me to Mass General Hospital. to the emergency room of the hospital. And we walk in with me in her arms, screaming, "My boy is dying! My boy is dying! My boy is dying!" And if you've ever been into an emergency room, the people at the front, they've seen everything. They have seen everything. And a large woman says, "Sit down, we'll get to you." And she, La Diabla, says, "No, no, my boy is dying." And she carries me into the back through that curtain that leads from the waiting room to where the doctors are. And the woman is screaming, "You can't go back there. I'm calling the police. I'm calling." Didn't matter to La Diabla. Back we go. Back we go. Police are coming in. There's chaos. Finally, a young doctor. I know this was a doctor because he was wearing the stethoscope that all doctors wear. I think it keeps their head attached to their shoulders. And the doctor says to the cops, "I've got this." La Diabla puts me on a bed. And the doctor said, "What's going on?" And I explained about this intense migraine. I'm crying. La Diabla is crying. It's ruining her makeup. And the doctor said, "Have you ever taken drugs?" I said, "I have." He said, "I thought so." He said, "I'm going to put a needle in your arm. In a few minutes, you won't remember you have a headache." And he was right. At some point, all I remember was La Diabla carrying me up the stairs to her house, putting me in her bed, my bed, giving me a kiss on the forehead and telling me everything will be okay. And like all things, the migraine passed. I woke up the next morning a little hungover from the morphine that had been injected into my arm, to the smell of bacon, eggs, and toast. And coffee, of course. Always have to have coffee. And La Diabla asked me how I'm doing. She said, "Boy, I thought you were going to die last night." I said, "I thought I was going to die too." She said, "Please, stay longer. Stay as long as you'd like." And I did. I stayed a while. Must have been at least a month. I had my routine again with the street kids, but I stayed away from the drugs and alcohol. Would come in at night. Sometimes I'd get there before La Diabla left for work. And I had a life. But I also knew that at some point I needed to move on. One morning, I come in to the kitchen where La Diabla's making breakfast with my backpack. And I said, "It's time for me to go." I said, "But before I do, I have something for you." And I reached into my pocket and I pulled out the money that I had stolen from this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person. And I said, "I took this from you and I want to return it." La Diabla said, "I knew you did, and I want you to keep it. You need it more than I do." And La Diabla kissed me on the forehead and told me I always had a home. No one had ever told me I will always have a home. And I left and moved on to the next place. Until many years later, as I'm looking into the eyes of that elderly, elegant black man, I remembered who that was. He remembered who I was. He walked over to me and sat down, told me how proud he was of my success, and told me again, I always have a home and I've never seen him since, but I owe a lot to him. Thank you.
Okay. How amazing.
It was pretty. It still is pretty amazing. Um, I, I'm used to. I was used to, and probably still am used to, just being kicked to the curb. And um, now I've been married for 41 years, and I have a wonderful family, and I'm not homeless. And but somewhere along, and this is the story's over. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of who I was and where I came from. And at that moment, I remembered who I was. And and today, I mean, I've given away everything, and I didn't have much, but I gave it all away and quit the practice of law. And were my wife here, she'd know, she'd agree. Um, I'm pretty much broke, except for the fact that I'm in debt up to here from things that I shouldn't have considered. But I have a heart. I have a heart that I rediscovered. And I'm just sort of grateful to the people along the way who showed me kindness, like La Diabla, and again Angela Lloyd. I'm a hard nut sometimes, and I admit it. And Barry Stewart, man, knows that a little bit about me, and I'm not entirely welcome in all the storytelling world because I have an edge. Angela Lloyd, like La Diabla before her, found something in me that allowed her to open her heart to me and allow me to be a decent human being. Anyway, I'll shut up. I'm tired of hearing my voice.
I
Thank you.
Go ahead,
Thank,
Diana, go ahead.
sorry, I'm very moved. Thank you. I think I've heard the story before, but I want to say that I wanted to tell you that I think all of us in one way or another have been homeless. It may have only been for 2 hours or it could have been for months. But thank you. And thank you for bringing up Angela Lloyd. Her memory be a blessing. And people can look on YouTube, and there's a tribute from the National Storytelling Network to her, and see her latest work where she was talking about going to the festival. She was a real light.
Yes, he was. And we lose too many of our community. And I'm happy to see some younger faces here because some of us are aging. And hopefully the people who come behind us will carry on our traditions and create their own traditions and take them where they go. And um, and if you need to call us up in a dark moment and ask our help or our advice, we want it. We're here, and we'll always be here till we're not. And I'm waxing eloquent or talking too much. I want to say, Eric, I truly appreciate what you do and how you bring people together and allow our different cultures to interweave and to allow us to interweave personal narrative and folk tale. And you're a special person, Eric, even if you are from Queens. And I know that.
I'm not from Queens, born and raised in Midtown Manhattan.
I thought you were from Bayside, Queens.
Oh, Midtown.
Midtown. That's even worse. That's where my office used to be.
But I've known you for a few years now, and I've only seen good edges.
Mm. Well, I've gotten old enough where that some of those other edges and some of those stories I used to tell with Laura Nemi, neither of us will be telling anymore. We've just aged out, and but we have a whole boatload of other stories. Um, and if since some of you don't know either me or Lauren, Lauren's a dear friend and storyteller and the person who dragged me into storytelling many years ago. What firm was I with, Barry? Several. I'll talk to you after. Um, we used to tour a show called 55 Minutes of Sex, Drugs, and Audience Participation, which earned rave reviews. And the LA Times referred to it as a tour de force, which I wrote them back and said I wouldn't have called it a tour de force, but since you did, I will quote you whenever I possibly can. And it was, to see two older men telling stories like that today is enough to make me want to bring up my breakfast. So we don't do those kinds of stories anymore. But I, I, I want you all to know that, too often we walk by the people who are on the street, who are in need, and go, wow, aren't I glad I'm not one of them? Um, everybody you meet, whether they're the one who sits in the corner office at the top of the building or the one over an air vent on the street, we're all people. We're all human. And those people need our love and our respect as much as everybody else. I'm preaching now. I'm not a rabbi, although I should have been, but um, love your neighbor, love your friends. You never know when you lose them. And if you're married, never go to sleep angry. Whatever bugged you during the day between you and your spouse, remember, don't go to sleep angry because you don't know if you'll see them in the morning. Okay, I'm being maudlin. It's the middle of winter here. The sun is out. It's a beautiful, clear, cold day, and that brings joy to my heart. I like winter. Liked it more when I was younger, but I like it still. Anybody have any questions? I'm tired of my
Yeah,
voice.
yes,
Please
yes.
say
When
something.
I said amazing, what's most amazing is that Diabla saw the good in you and saw it and felt it so strongly that she invited you into her home. That's amazing that a person can see the positive like that.
It wasn't normal for me then, but it also, let's turn that on its head. I saw the positive in her, and biases I may have had about those people, whatever those people were, um, melted away. And I taught me a lesson about acceptance and kindness as well.
Mhm. Okay. So now let's, does anyone else want to say anything or shall I stop the recording? Let's stop the recording and then just talk off the record. Okay.
May
Go,
I
go
say
go ahead,
something?
Niana.
Okay, sorry.
Oops, wait. Can I invite people to my workshop?
Go ahead.
So the Chennai International Storytelling Festival is going to be in February, and I've never told a story. I've never run a workshop. I've got 90 minutes. It's my first time. I'm scared shitless,
No.
but I have something important to say.
Hmm.
And basically, it took me 50 years to figure out how to do what you guys are doing about using story as healing.
Hmm.
And so I had to go to therapist and get all kinds of jargon about reframing, learning that storytelling could be helpful when in true life, just like what Howard said, all of us have storytelling in our hearts and we have it as a tool when things are bad, whenever we need it. So I'm doing a workshop. I was going to call it flip-flop stories, but people think I'm talking about sandals. So I'm going to call it flip it stories. And it's going to be very simple. And I'd like kids to come as well. And it's going to be how to take something bad that happens to you, how to turn that into a short personal narrative, and then how to flip it. And if anybody has any ideas for me about what to do, I don't know how to, for activities for breakout times and how to make it as helpful as possible for people. Um, I would love some input, and Eric's been helping me. And
I'll talk with you about it.
yeah, and thank you. And also my hobby is working with string, sacred string, and collecting stories. So I'd like to put a call out for people who have stories about string or anything about sacred string or how string has saved your life or helped you, somebody you know. Um, that's going to be my project next year. And thank you, Howard. And yeah, I'm very sad about Angela. I never met her live, just on Zoom, but she was a great spirit. She lifted many people all the time.
Now, Nana, I have some thoughts, and if I don't know how we would communicate. Are you in Chennai? Or are you in the States or wherever you
Oh
are?
no, I'm in West Concord, Massachusetts.
Okay. Um,
I'll put my email in the chat. Will
okay.
that work?
And I'll give you my cell number. You can call me.
Yeah,
I,
wait a
if it,
minute.
I don't have to, but I always have
Yeah, no,
thoughts.
I'd love to call you. We're about the same age. I'm just looking for, wait a minute.
Wait a minute, I'm gonna stop the recording.
Oh, yeah, stop the recording.